Okay, here's the second example in section 1.1. What I want to do is now look at a graph and look at the parent function, and then I want you to describe the transformation using some of the terms that we've learned in this section. So obviously I know you're not going to be able to graph these when I ask you some questions, but for this first example, let's look at the parent function and what we know about its graph. So in this case right here, you look at this function and you look at the basics of this function. You know it's not a constant because there's a variable. You know it's not absolute value because there's no absolute value sign. And you know it's not quadratic because there's no exponent. So just by process of elimination, you know that this is linear. But also, just when you see these, when you see that there's only a single variable with no exponent, you should be able to recognize that as a linear function. Now in this case, we look at some certain values here that tells us some information. Remember, if we look at our format of mx plus b, we know that the slope here is 1, and that's a positive slope, which means our graph is going to be going up to the right. And you see that the y-intercept is -4. So we know that this is going to have a y-intercept of -4. Now if you look at the parent function for linear, we know that linear is going to have a slope of 1 and a y-intercept of 0. So let's go ahead and look at both of these graphs and then see what transformation has happened. So here's our two functions. Here's our parent function, f of x equals x, and here's our function g, x minus 4. So if you look at these, they both have a slope of 1. X minus 4 and x both have a slope of 1. So you know there's been no vertical stretch or vertical shrink. Okay? And you know there's been no reflection because they still are going up to the right with the same slope. But all that's happened here is this graph has moved down 4 units. So what we say is that is a translation. That's where we slide down. Okay, a translation is sliding up or down or to the left or to the right. In this case, we slid down 4 units. So this would be a translation 4 units below. It's a vertical translation because we shifted down. Vertical is up or down, horizontal is left or right. So this would just be translating down 4 units. And as we already described, the parent function is linear because this is in the linear family. So that's all you do. You compare your graph to the parent function and you look at the changes and see what type of change has been made. Now what I want you to do is I want you to look at this example right here. I want you to look at the parent function, describe, say what family it is, look at the parent function, and then compare the graph here to the parent function and describe the transformation. Now obviously you're not going to be able to write the graph in the text box that comes up, but in your notes I want you to graph both of these and compare the changes and then look at the vocab words we learned and describe using those terms what it was. So go ahead and enter those into the text box that comes up now. Okay, now what we're going to do is look at the next example, example 3. This has us look at a different type of transformation. So same thing that we're going to do right here. We're going to graph this function and its parent function and then describe the transformation. So if we look right here at this function, we should be able to tell right away that this is a quadratic function. So we want to go ahead and graph this function and then compare it to the parent function of our quadratic. So let's go ahead and graph both of these and then describe the transformation. So if we go ahead, and you remember graphing these with quadratics, you can just use a table of values. What that means is you take a couple different x values and you go ahead and calculate their y values and then plot those on a graph. So for here, we can pick the values between -2 and +2, and we can calculate what the y values would be. Now, if we do those for both our parent function and our new function, we go ahead and we get these values. -2 squared is 4, -1 squared is 1, 0 squared is 0, 1 squared is 1, 2 squared is 4. We do the same thing for -x squared, and we get all the same values but negative. So if we go ahead and plot those, we see that our parent function has a slope going up, and our new function has a slope going down. Now, the curves increase at the same rate. We look at these, and they're both going up and down at the same values right here. You can see that because all of these values are the same. But what's happened is our new graph has flipped over the y-axis, or the x-axis, I mean. So if we look back, we look at all of our different terms right here, we know that that's a reflection. So you know that it's just the parent function flipped over the x-axis, which is just a reflection over the x-axis of the parent function. So again, graphing our function and the parent function, then comparing them and using our terms, we know that this is just a reflection. So what I want you guys to do right now is find the parent function for this, and then also graph this function, and then in the text box that comes up, I want you to go ahead and tell me what parent function this is for this function, and then describe the transformation. So go ahead and do that now.